Well, from our Pretoria studios, we're very pleased to welcome Professor Lesiba Tefo, who is a political analyst. Prof, a very good afternoon to you once again. Political contestation is just part of democracy, but in your view, do you think that democracy is at play as the ANC prepares for next weekend's all-important elective conference?
Well, look, it is a mark of democracy to periodically hold elections in order to usher in a new government and a new leadership. But it is not sufficient in and by itself. What is critical, and in the debate I'm listening to right now, is what it is that you are going to offer to advance the interests of the people. You listen to the rhetoric, you listen to Madam Mbete, you listen to Madam Duarte, you say, what is new that I'm hearing from their voices? Nothing. Especially when they talk about unity and talking about will come out intact. Because the past three conferences in Polokwane and in Mangaung attest to the contrary. Then you say, in which world do they live? Or perhaps indeed, in the true tradition of politics speak, you just sprout out words without considering what their weight is. You listen to Madame Mbete, is talking about the needs of our people. But when you look at their actions, it contradicts what they say. However, let them be given a chance. Maybe the past two elective conferences that resulted in splits might have given them lessons that may heed going forward.
And Prof, while we're speaking of contradictions, I mean, while we're on that point, I mean, more members taking the party to court, yet the leadership keeps assuring us that the disputes have been settled. Is this a good way to head into this much important conference? I mean, we saw the same thing with the July policy conference where the party already gave the media a ruling that they will not be discussing certain things, like, of course, the very important succession debate. And most people felt that it was here that this debate should have been addressed once and for all.
Yes, indeed. If not only then, the greatest lesson to learn was really written on that fateful day when we went to the to the conference in 2014. The people spoke in no unclear terms, and the writing was there for all to read and to internalize. But the 2 years that went by tells me that nothing was learned. If anything, the party is more fractured today than it ever was. And indeed, today we are talking even about the conferences. I mean, a festival of shares. And some may predict that the West may still come 2 weeks from now. But again, that is nobody's wish. It is within them. If they can dip within themselves, and say, by the way, it is not about us, it is about other people. But unfortunately, truth be told, the movement as it stands right now is so fractured and is so defocused on the will of the people, namely to serve rather than to be served, to be imbued with public spirit and to be driven by chapter 10. And some of them, they don't even remember what chapter 10 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa is all about. And I invite them to revisit that one. Perhaps it might assist them going forward. Because it's all about public service and the principles and the values that should imbue anybody who aspires for public office. And the winning nations of the world, they know as I do, that good governance is a sine qua non. It's a necessary condition for socio-economic development.
Look, Prof, let's talk about this now. Limpopo and, of course, all the Capes have pronounced on Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa as their nominated candidate. We're waiting for KwaZulu-Natal now, which is, of course, the biggest region. And they are rumored to be behind Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. But do you think that single province can make a huge difference when it comes to the final outcome of the elective conference? Let's just speculate around this, Prof.
I'll try to remain consistent, and to some extent that is a whole of intellectual honesty those of us are subscribed to. That in the true tradition of the African National Congress, if people are consistent with it, and they pretend to be, or they want to be, then it will be Ramaphosa. And what is coming down bit by bit to me, indeed, suggests that Ramaphosa will prevail. The history of the African National Congress since 1949, when they took that decision, tells me, yes, indeed, it will be Ramaphosa. What Ramaphosa doesn't need in KwaZulu-Natal is a 100% win. And I'm saying if he can only get 10 or 20%, that should be enough. And hence I said earlier on that the role that Bheki Cele plays, and possibly with the fired blade in Zimande would play, just to ensure that there is no unity, it would be to Ramaphosa's advantage. They will never be as united as they were yesteryear. Therefore, let's just don't assume that holus bolus, they will come and give the vote to Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. It is not going to happen that way. And neither is same going to apply in Mpumalanga. If anything, it does seem like the leader may be assuming that he's leading a united front, but the signs are telling otherwise. And I'm beginning to believe that he too is conscious of that fact, but he's playing his card fairly well, so that when all else fails, he will say, I've tried on the unity card, we have failed, and whoever has won cannot blame me for not trying. Perhaps even history of the African National Congress might say, perhaps, and perhaps indeed, had he been listened to on the unity ticket, we might have prevailed.
You know, Prof, speaking of unity, I was listening to and watching interviews early this morning, and we're interviewing, of course, the leadership in KZN. They spoke to Mdumiseni Ntuli, who disputed this whole notion that there might be a unity candidate, so to speak. He says, no, they don't have that within the current contestants. Everybody should be on the same wavelength. But now, what does this mean? Does this mean that, of course, the members are very different, hold different views to the leadership of the party?
Look, the unity candidate or the unity ideal failed in Polokwane. Yeah. And I know those were in the forefront of what I call the third wave. I think it was Paulo Jordan, the former governor, Reserve Bank governor. With all the bona fides, they sought to unite the parties and said, you know what, let's get a middle position here. But the battle line was so entrenched and so distinct that none was prepared to listen to that. If anything, others even threatened to kill, others threatened to unleash the tsunami. Now I'm saying, is the situation different? If anything, the ANC is more divided, more factionalized, and more fractured today than it was yesterday. Therefore, it's a pipe dream. Sometimes I listen to people speak, they're just proud words, without really consciously processing what they really mean and what the message they are giving to the people. And neither does it suggest to me they also take into cognizance the context within which they utter those words. Some may have carried weight 10 years ago, certainly not today.
And Prof, I mean, speaking of that now, let's look at the fact that now Mpumalanga has been touted as being the kingmaker for this particular conference. What do you think gives it that power or that clout to say they should be the kingmakers and make the final decision as to who really becomes the next president of the ruling party?
We shall one day invite the scholars and the researchers to go and find out how the small province like Mpumalanga ultimately garnered enough support where it can even become the second one with the biggest delegation.
Absolutely.
Besides KwaZulu-Natal. That becomes a subject for research for me.
Yeah.
Now, the kingmaker thing is like the joker and somebody who's going to cast the last die. And I'm saying it's certainly not going to be Mpumalanga. I don't think they are as united as we are made to believe. In fact, if you look at it, even the latest media statements that I read about 10 minutes ago or 5 minutes ago, tell me that they are not as united. The so-called unity candidate that got the majority votes, they say, if you take that out, right, disaggregate that, it gives you Ramaphosa as a winner. It's not me, the people on the ground, the people who were at the conference. That unity candidate doesn't exist. It's not in the lexicon of the African National Congress. Neither is it a legal persona. Therefore, we take it out. Then when you put it together, you end up with Ramaphosa being in the forefront. I hold no brief from Ramaphosa, but I have a problem when out of political expediency and opportunism, the people that are with then in Polokwane, when we said it is a turn for Zuma, based on the tradition and the principles and the protocols, are today saying the opposite. And some of them not even with the necessary courage to face me in the eye, because they lack the moral authority and the intellectual honesty to so do.
And Prof, you know, I also heard something, that an idea that was thrown around for the first time. What are the likely probabilities or possibilities of this conference coming into a tie? What will this then mean if there is ever a tie? Will there be, would there have to be then a rerun of all of course, the nominations by the regions? What would happen?
Well, that's what logic would prescribe.
Yeah.
That we'll vote and vote and vote, and we'll sit, we'll discuss, we'll convince one another, right? Until we reach maybe a consensus, to a point where perhaps one may even say, I step down in favor of X on condition X gives me Z, right? That could be it. But again, that is just intellectual engagement. I don't see us reaching that stage. I would rather see the conference collapse than at least reaching that tie, a moment of tie break. I'm not foreseeing that possibility.
All right, Prof. And of course, going back to your earlier point, you know, when we're talking about democracy, a lot of people are saying that, but we're still seeing a lot of provincial leaders, like the current leadership, actually putting certain people for certain positions in the next regime. Do you think this is what's happening here? And then who's not being honest with us when they say that everything is open and transparent?
You can lie to the people sometime, at one point, all of them, but not all the time.
Yeah.
And South African society, I say, it is more politically literate than we want to grant them. And they understand these things. I said last week, when we spoke about the coalition government, and I said, you know what? Coalitions will always be fractious and problematic. But we are learning, we are growing, and that's my wish and the ideal that 29 and beyond, we can go into that. But there will always be a winner who shall set the tone. But to the extent possible, the winner will have to take cognizance and take into consideration the other views of at least those who are in the coalition. Some people are not even aware that Britain has a coalition, Germany has a, but because the democracies have so matured, and they are all about the other and not the self, they are being imbued with the public spirit, then they have no challenge, they have no problem. Because we know when they go to the elections, it's about the people. If you allow me, I'm more optimistic if the ANC were to have the courage of its conviction. Change the Electoral Act so that the people can be held accountable for they shall have been appointed by their constituencies. Right? That's what the ANC is telling me in the documents I've read, but they are not new. In the 3 conferences I've attended, they've been saying that. Hence I say, perhaps this time they have the and if they have that, the ANC is endowed with men and women of integrity, with the intellectual capital to take this country forward. They will end up with the right people in the right positions. But as the system stands, they will keep lying to themselves and not to me and to others, that the people we deploy have the necessary competence, skills, and pedigree.
Yeah.
It is no longer enough to talk about the struggle credentials. That card has lost its value, has lost its currency, has lost its credibility.
Prof, well put there. Thank you so much for joining us from our Pretoria studios. Political analyst, Professor Lesiba Tefo, for saying that the ANC really needs to look at changing its electoral act.